All right, we're back with episode 21 of the Feel for the Game podcast. We are just done with conference championship weekend. Chaos has ensued. We've got a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and get into our first recap. We're going to start with the Conference USA championship game. Kennesaw State, after going 2-10 last year, takes down Jacksonville State in a rematch and a revenge game and wins 19-15 after almost giving up a 12 to nothing lead in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, the story of this game for 3 quarters was the Kennesaw State defense. I think they had them held to 0 entering the fourth quarter.
It was like mid fourth
And
quarter.
then there was the punt that was like, was it returned and then fumbled crazy?
Yeah,
And
it
then
was a
Jacksonville
kickoff,
State
I
got
think,
it.
because they had just scored.
Yeah, no, it was the safety kickoff
Oh,
because
yeah.
Kennesaw just got a safety to make it 12 to nothing. And then it was the safety kickoff.
Yeah, that would have given them a huge chance to really put a dagger in the game if they had just gone ahead and scored on that drive. Like a touchdown puts them at 19-0. That game's over. But they end up fumbling, giving the ball in plus territory to Jacksonville State. They go down and score. So it's 12 to 7 at that point. And then Jacksonville State gets the ball back and scores again.
Yeah, and then gets the 2 to go up 15 to 12.
Yeah, so that put Kennesaw in a bad spot. They really hadn't moved the ball too well most of the day. And then they finally get to running the ball a little bit better. Cam Cook kind of ups his average a little bit with a couple decent runs. But what it came down to at the end was a run from Amari Odom, the quarterback for Kennesaw State, on 4th and 14, gets 14
They also had
yards.
a 3rd and 27 where they got 26 yards and then got the
Insane.
4th and 1.
So he ends up getting the rush on 4th and 14 to give them a first down in the red zone. They get a 15-yard personal foul, which would then set up the game-winning touchdown throw for Amari Odom. And I think that Amari Odom easily with those plays was the key player in the game. He finished 26 for 32, which is 82% completion percentage. Really solid output. 246 and a touchdown, no interceptions. I mean, if you had told me this time last year that Kennesaw State would be in this position, I would have told you you're crazy. Like if they beat Wake Forest earlier in the season, and let's say James Madison doesn't have that great of a year, Kennesaw State might have been in the playoffs or
They would
something
have been for
crazy.
sure.
It would have been nuts, and they almost beat Wake Forest. They lost by 1 point, and Wake Forest was an 8-4 team, which is also crazy. So that's how close Kennesaw State was to being on Selection Sunday today, which is absolutely mental. But they had a great season after a terrible start last year. They did beat Liberty last year, so that was a good upset win for them. But that was probably the only highlight last year for them.
Yeah, and then Liberty this year was so bad.
Liberty was awful. I feel bad for Greg McElroy. He picked them as his playoff Group of Five team, and sure enough, we ended up getting two Group of Five teams in the playoff, which is absolutely
I
unreal.
picked one of them too.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in just a minute. We're going to talk about the selection. We just watched it here just a moment ago, so we're not going to do our live reaction this time. We have a couple reasons for that, which we're going to get to, but we've already seen it, so we're going to finish doing our recap and we'll get back to that. But exciting stuff. Kennesaw State knocks off Jacksonville State 19-15. Next up, we have Alabama versus Georgia in the SEC championship game. Final in Atlanta. Georgia takes a commanding 28-7 win. Alabama. I mean, I really thought that they were going to be able to pull off another win here, but I wasn't extremely confident in it, just given how rematches typically are, which we saw yesterday in several different conference championship games. Rematches are not chalk; they're not always going to go in the favor of the team that won.
Yeah, I mean, whatever magic Alabama's had against Georgia the past few decades, it was not there yesterday. Just complete domination by Georgia. Bama, negative rushing yards, -3 rushing yards.
Yeah, I think if you look at one thing, you can look at Alabama's total yards in this game: 209 total yards, -3 rushing yards. So, given that 212 of their total yards were all passing, and that's really not even that impressive. They had a terrible offensive output. A screen from Jeremy Bernard being the only touchdown they got, which was all him, had nothing to do with really any other side of the ball or position group outside of maybe the offensive line blocking. It was kind of just a Jeremy Bernard play. Alabama had no offensive output. They were 1 for 3 on fourth down. 23 total minutes of time of possession, which is awful, especially for Alabama. And they went 0 for 1 in the turnover battle. That alone tells me that they got dominated. I don't really need to see any other key metrics. Gunnar Stockton played really well. He was consistent, going for 195 total yards and 3 touchdowns, but he didn't have to do much in this game. I didn't really have to see him make too many big time throws for them to win. I mean, they only needed, I guess, 10 points really to win this game and be comfortably in the lead because Bama didn't put up a touchdown until late. So, given the fact that the defense was able to play well and they had the key special teams play, wide receiver Cole Spencer blocked a punt in the first quarter I feel like that kind of set the tone. I mean, when you have a player like that who doesn't typically see the field, it makes a huge special teams play. Like Kirby was saying previously that in the press conference before the game, that special teams plays in this game would come down to probably how the game ends up leaning. Like it's going to play a huge factor, and they got the big special teams play. That ended up really shifting things in the momentum of Georgia the whole game.
Yeah, and this is a Georgia defense that's been questioned all year, but right now it looks like they're coming into vintage Georgia defense form these last few games.
Yeah, their pressure rate and their havoc rate has gone up a ton. They don't look like the same team that was playing in the middle of the season. Like even though they beat Ole Miss in Athens, I'm not taking anything away from that win. Their defense was terrible until middle of the fourth quarter when they decided to pin their ears back and put pressure on Trinidad Chambliss. And Ole Miss walked down the field 5 straight touchdown drives on them. That Georgia defense has not come back since then. And when I say that, I mean the bad side. Like Georgia's defense has come to play every single week since then. I'm thoroughly impressed. I'm honestly more concerned for Georgia's offense against teams like Indiana, teams like Ohio State. If they make it that far, it's looking like they're shaping up for a second round game against Ole Miss, which would be a rematch, like we just talked about. So I think Georgia would be favored by probably 4.5 to 5 points in that matchup, but it's a sneaky game for sure. Depending on how Ole Miss plays in their first round game, we'll see what that shapes up to be like. But I feel like Georgia's in a really good spot. So really big win for Georgia, breaking the Tide curse. Kirby Smart's got to be feeling really good about this football team. I still don't feel like this is one of his best Georgia teams, and they're 12-1 right now, and they're in the top three of the college football playoff. So really good stuff for Georgia. We'll see what they're able to do down the stretch. Alabama not really shaping up for a great rematch, most likely against Oklahoma. So I don't think that Tide fans are going to be too excited about that if they make the playoffs.
It's going to be a whole lot of points in that one.
Yeah, I think a 10-7 final could be very possible with maybe 7 to 8 turnovers.
Yes.
Something crazy like that. So we'll see what that ends up being. We'll get to talking about that here in a little bit. The Big 12 championship, Texas Tech rematch against BYU. Another blowout for the Red Raiders against BYU. 34-7 was the final. It really profiled almost the exact same as the last game, except BYU scored first. That was really the only difference. And they didn't
Yeah,
score
I
again after
mean,
that.
it was pretty much an identical game, except Texas Tech was a little bit better in the red zone this time.
I think they were better in the red zone, and they also got more turnovers, which you would think would make it a bigger blowout, but they only won by 5 more points. That doesn't really matter at all. They dominated this solid BYU football squad, so I think you got to give all the credit to the defense here. I mean, the offense played solid. They made plays when they needed to, but the defense gave them every opportunity to score a million points in this game. Ben Roberts, linebacker for Texas Tech, had 2 interceptions, and Coy Eakin, the wide receiver for Texas Tech, had 2 touchdowns. Those, in my opinion, were the two impact players of this game for Texas Tech. I mean, the interception Ben Roberts had in the third quarter to give them that 14-point lead. They would go down and score inevitably after that. That was the big turning point because BYU played better for the first half of this game than they did in the first matchup. But just like the last one, Texas Tech kind of broke away there at the end and just out stamina this BYU football team.
There's just too much talent on one side. I mean, it felt like just a dam breaking over the course of this game, and that's kind of how it was last time too. Just an onslaught there late from Texas Tech to really put this one away.
Yeah, and BYU, like we talked about all season, is a complimentary football team. When they lose a turnover battle 4-0 and they go over 2 on fourth down, that is 6 possessions they give to the other team and they're not able to capitalize on. So they have no chance in a football game like that. That's what they thrive off of. If if BYU would have won this game, we would have seen a stat like maybe they win the turnover battle 3-1 and they're 3 for 4 on fourth down, or they're 4 for 5 in the red zone. That's the scenario BYU wins this football game. We were on the flip side. So another lopsided conference championship game. Texas Tech is solidified, most likely a top 4 seed, and they look like they're probably going to have a chance to make a run. So with that first round bye, they're in a really good spot. Moving on, we've got the Big Ten championship game. I think there were probably some people outside of the Indiana fan base that thought that Indiana had a chance here, but there weren't many. If they did, they didn't think it was going to be a game like this. Final, Indiana wins 13-10 in a slugfest, but Fernando Mendoza and Charlie Becker were the show in this game, connecting on several huge pass plays to give Indiana the final lead in this game and the final say. I was very impressed. Despite the fact that they only put up 13 points, I felt like they were the better offensive football team on the field. They didn't have Omar Cooper for pretty much the whole game. And he's been one of their most impact players all season. He leads the team in receptions. And He's up there in touchdowns with Elijah Surratt, mainly because he's a red zone target. They're probably around the same touchdown share, but he's been a key player all season. Charlie Becker steps up and has 6 catches for 126 and no touchdowns, but all of his catches were huge plays.
What impressed me the most was Indiana in the trenches. I did not think that they would have the ability to win there as much as they did. I mean, I think the rushing stats were something crazy. It was like maybe 150 to 40 or something like that in favor of Indiana. I never would have thought that.
Yeah, and they lived in the backfield too. They had like 5 sacks on Julian Sand.
They had like 10 TFLs.
A ton of TFLs, super disruptive. I think every single team on that side of the bracket, when the playoffs get announced, has got to be terrified of playing that front. I mean, if you can do that to Ohio State, what happens if you play a team like, let's say they play Ole Miss? Ole Miss has shown that they can play offense against anybody. Like any team they've played, they've put up at least 450 total yards. Like they're torching everybody. And they may not be scoring 50 points a game, but they're moving the ball on everybody. Let's say they hit a stonewall against Indiana and they get absolutely trounced. That would be a huge statement win for Indiana to say, look what we just did against one of the best offenses in college football. Let's say they do the same thing against Georgia. They play Georgia in one of the final games and they just stonewall Georgia and Georgia does nothing. Or they run a zone defense, kind of like what Georgia Tech did, and Gunnar Stockton throws for 60 yards and 2 interceptions and they lose in a blowout. I mean, you got to be feeling pretty confident that Indiana probably is the best team in college football after a win like that. You just beat Ohio State. I mean, I wouldn't want to play Indiana right now. Imagine if they beat a team like Georgia like that. It's a real possibility. We could be seeing a matchup like that.
I mean, I would not be surprised if they're hoisting the trophy in a month
Yeah, I
at
think there's
all.
probably a lot of people betting on Indiana right now. They're probably shifting to be the odds-on favorite, but Ohio State's probably still right there. Same with Georgia. I doubt they're too far behind. Texas Tech's probably getting a lot of money too, I would think, with a team that has a solid disruptive unit on defense as well. They're definitely going to be up there. So this game was, I mean, obviously not a lot of points, but there were a lot of key
It was a
plays.
really good football game to only be 13 to 10.
It was a classic Big Ten football game that I think anybody could watch. There's a lot of games like we do our optical assault game of the week now, and a lot of them are Big Ten games that are unwatchable. I feel like this is the definition of a game that if you just saw the score and you saw the teams, you'd be like, ugh, another Big Ten game. But if you actually watched the game, it didn't feel like it was 13 to 10. So I really enjoyed this one. We got to watch it from start to finish, which we don't get to do very often. The key plays that I noticed in this one, both were in the hands of Ohio State on 4th and 1. 4th and 1, they get stuffed on a QB sneak. We come back from the break and they tell us it's short. We thought they get the
And that
first
was like
down.
inside Indiana's 5 yard line.
Huge. They would have scored a touchdown most likely on that drive. And Indiana's red zone defense is incredible. They probably would have scored. Then you get the 27-yard field goal they miss on 4th and 1 because they like to play it safe. What happens if Ohio State doesn't play it safe? They get the first down, they score a touchdown, the game's over. We have a completely different conversation. So it's 2 play calls. All you need to do is get 1 yard. You take the riskier route and you go for it. You don't get it. You get a second chance and you say, I'm going to play it safe, and then you still don't get it. That sucks. If you're Ohio State, that's a feeling you don't want to sit with for the next couple of weeks. So I think when they get back on the field, when they rematch Indiana, inevitably, in my opinion, I think at some point in the playoffs, I think they're going to remember those 2 plays. I think that's going to be a driving force in when they get in those situations again. What does Ohio State do? Do they go for the throat and go for the knockout punch, or do they try and play it safe? High percentage stuff like a QB sneak and a field goal, I don't think we see those calls again.
Well, the interesting thing about the QB sneak is it wasn't like it was 4th and 1 and it was like 3/4 of a yard. It was 4th and 1.5, and they did a QB sneak, which I thought was pretty interesting. And it's a
Yeah,
pretty long yardage for a QB sneak.
especially with a guy like Julian Sand who's not going to move the pile. If it's Jalen Hurts, yeah, I guess go for it. But like it's Julian Sand, so sketchy call there from Ryan Day. But I think that football team's going to have a head of steam in the playoffs regardless of how they finish that game. So really interesting one. Indiana now the number 1 team in college football. Never thought I would say that.
Wild stuff.
Team that has the most losses in college football history is now the number 1 team going
It's
into the
like a
playoffs.
college football 26 rebuild in real
Love to
life.
see it. Kurt Signetti has the greatest rebuild we've probably ever seen. So looking forward to watching them down the stretch. The ACC championship game. What could you expect other than complete disaster from the ACC after this season? That's exactly what we got. Duke wins 27-20, and I didn't think there was a route for them to win this. I really thought Virginia was going to handle business, but like we said in our review before this, when we were talking about this game, it's the ACC. There's just no telling what's going to
It's
happen.
the dumbest outcome is going to happen, and that's why I picked Duke to win this game.
I mean, we've been talking about Duke kind of in the background as noise for the past couple of weeks. Like, what happens if they actually do make it? Because we're like, the scenario is just them making it to the conference championship and knocking out a team like Miami or Georgia Tech, who probably would win and go to the playoffs. And we were like, oh, that's not going to happen after they lost to UConn and they dropped another conference game. Well, they still made it. There's going to be a lot of reevaluation on tiebreakers after that. It's unbelievable they even made it there. But they win the football game at the end of the day.
Can't talk crap to them because they ended up winning it.
They lost to this team 34-17 just a couple weeks ago, only to beat them when it mattered most in the championship game. So another rematch where the team that lost the first matchup pretty considerably ended up winning. Luke Margot gets the game-sealing interception. He also had 9 tackles. I think that he absolutely was the MVP of this game from Duke. Love to see a player like that get a game-sealing pick in a huge game. I don't know that that gets them into the playoffs or anything crazy like that, but it caps off a solid season for a coach who got fired from Miami, winning an ACC championship game before Mario Cristobal and Miami actually get it done.
Yeah, I'm not sure the Cristobal is ever going to get it done, to be honest.
It's unreal. I mean, I never would have thought that would have been the case. You could have told me this exact scenario preseason, and it would have sounded completely fictional, like impossible. But
Only
here
the
we are.
ACC.
Yep, only the ACC could get that done. A fourth and goal touchdown pass from Darian Mensah, followed by a roughing the passer, really tanked Virginia here, which ended up leading to the Luke Margot interception to seal the game. I thought that was a really gutsy call for them to go for it there, but necessary. You have nothing to lose. Go for it. So I like that play call a lot. They end up getting it done there. Stat in this game, Chandler Morris and his interceptions end up costing the Cavaliers in this one. The interception early in the game, I think it was like in the early third quarter leading into the second half. It was just a throw up play. They were in their own end zone just trying to get out. I think it was like third down and he heaves it downfield into like triple coverage. Gets picked off, was not pretty. The interception to end the game was just like, if you're a Virginia fan, just give us a chance. They did not really have much of a chance being 40 yards out in overtime, but that's where it ended up being, and they throw it up for grabs. Chandler Morris goes down with 2 really bad interceptions in this one to lose them this football game. They had a chance to come back there in the end. They were down 10 points in the fourth quarter, made it an OT game, and then choked again. So I'm glad this team didn't make the playoffs. They were okay, but they didn't have any business playing Ole Miss in Oxford anyway. So unfortunately, another team who has no business playing Ole Miss in Oxford is going to probably end up playing them. So we'll probably end up previewing that game at some point with Tulane heading to Oxford, most likely as the betting favorite for the 11 seed. But this game, complete chaos.
One more thing about this game is, well, it's actually in reference to another game, but how conned we all were by Virginia's offensive performance way back in September against Florida State.
Yeah,
We thought this Virginia offense was so good, and no,
I ended up
not at all.
betting on Virginia in that game. I thought like after that, I was like, dang, they might be a sleeper to win the ACC. And I bet on them again. They beat Louisville. I was like, oh crap! Like that might have been the before. I think I bet on them within the next couple of weeks, whenever they played each other. I don't remember what the order was because it was September, but I bet on them in both those games. They win. Then they have a pretty easy path to ACC championship game. We looked at their schedule and like, okay, they could do that. We just need some crazy stuff to happen, like Miami losing, Georgia Tech losing, and all of it ended up happening. But they couldn't get it done when it mattered. So, unfortunately, Chandler Morris could not call his shot and win a championship in his first season with Virginia. He played great, but at the end of the day, those interceptions really killed him. So, I think that's been a defining characteristic of his career going back to TCU. It's just the turnovers. Next, we had a very surprising result in the American Athletic Conference Championship. Tulane dominated North Texas to take a commanding 34-21 victory in New Orleans. I didn't really see that coming. I thought North Texas was the better football team. I thought Drew Mestamaker was clearly the better quarterback. What it really came down to me was early in this game. The momentum was set on a Caleb Hawkins fumble in the first quarter. Tulane was already up 14-7, but North Texas was moving the ball. So it looked like it was going to shape up for a shootout. Caleb Hawkins gets hurt and fumbles the ball, does not return to the game. Caleb Hawkins leads the entire country in total offense points the whole season. More touchdowns than any player in the entire country. I think he's got more points than any kicker has in the country. So you lose that guy. That's a huge impact. Huge blow for them to lose Caleb Hawkins in this game. They end up going on a complete skid after that offensively, scoring no points until later in this game. It was like 31-7 at one point.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't in reach. I think North Texas tried to make it close there at the end, but 5 turnovers to Tulane's 0 turnovers, they never had a chance.
North Texas has had 2 games this year now in the spotlight in college football, and they've had 10 turnovers in those 2 games. And
Yeah,
that's really what it's all about.
that's just you can't win games and get away with stuff like that. So I mean, despite the fact that both those games they put up some points, their defense was really a huge letdown in both of those. Like USF put up 63 points on them.
Yeah.
That was a huge letdown. And then you had this game where Tulane really didn't have to do that much, but they still found the end zone.
I mean, all they had to do was take advantage of all the mistakes and just cash in on those chances.
Yeah, Retzlaff really didn't have that big of a game here, but he played clean. So at the end of the day, that's all you can ask from him because he struggled to throw the ball at different times of the season against really good teams. So North Texas flops on this one. They missed their chance at the college football playoff. I don't think we'll be seeing them in this picture for a while. I think we see players like Drew Mestamaker eventually leaving the portal, most likely in the offseason to go to teams like Oklahoma State, where Eric Morris will be the head coach next year. So they had their chance in the spotlight and they didn't make it happen. I hate that for them, but I think that's probably going to be the last we hear from North Texas for a little bit. Next, we have the MAC championship game. Of all the games on this slate, you probably could have profiled this one to be one of the weirdest ones. Maction is typically something that you watch and you just don't really have any answer for what you're watching on the screen sometimes. Where it's a crazy bot snap on a punt on a rare Tuesday night where a team looks like they're going to pull off an upset and they just completely choke. Or you have a game where there's multiple fumbles in the red zone taken back, some are overturned. That's just Maction. This game profiled exactly like that. It looked like Miami, Ohio was going to probably have a chance to pull off and win another game against Western Michigan this season, with this being a rematch as well. They end up having a key play turned over, which was a fumble that they got in the red zone on Western Michigan's quarterback.
He was down.
It was close. I'm not going to say that it should have gone either which way. I think the refs probably did make the right call, but this was a huge turning point call in the game because Miami, Ohio was only down 1 point. They get the ball back on their side of the field in the red zone on what would have been a fumble. They probably score and could take a lead there. Instead, Western Michigan ends up scoring on that drive because the call gets overturned. So I'm not saying that the officials made the wrong call. I'm just saying that it was a turning point in the game. So Western Michigan ends up controlling this game for the rest of the game. There really wasn't a chance for Miami, Ohio to do anything. And if there was, their offense just did nothing. They were very unimpressive. Their receiver had a really solid game. He had an incredible catch on the sideline in double coverage. Probably the best catch I've seen all season. I'm sure it'll be on SportsCenter top 10 as the number one play when Sunday evening rolls around. But it was an incredible catch. But Cam Perry, unfortunately, had the only highlight play of this entire game for Miami, Ohio. Jalen Buckley goes for 195 and 2 touchdowns for Western Michigan in what ended up just being a completely controlled game by the Broncos.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference in this game was on the ground. Western Michigan with 290 on the ground, Miami, Ohio with 70.
Yeah, Miami, Ohio just could not push the ball down the field. They were over 3 on fourth downs, and they got outgained by 125 yards by a team that can't really throw the football. So they had no chance in this one. Even though the score was only by 10 points, when it came down to it, Miami, Ohio's quarterbacks, which they had to play in this game, could not push the ball down the field. So Western Michigan, Maction champions of the year. Their quarterback had a really solid season, rushing for almost 1,000 yards at the quarterback position. So real spotlight player for Mac, and they had a really solid season. Next, we have the Sun Belt Conference Championship game. James Madison takes down Troy 31-14. I wasn't really impressed with James Madison in this game, to be honest with you. I thought that the score was really misleading, the final being 31-14. They don't cover, for one. They were like 24-point favorites in this game, which is insane being in a conference championship. And they needed several late fourth quarter touchdowns to make this look not near as bad as it was of a performance. They could not throw the ball on Troy for most of this game. They needed Wayne Knight to have a masterclass, go for 223 and a touchdown in this one, ripping off a 73-yard touchdown run to take their first lead of the game in the second quarter. I was just not impressed. So I fully anticipate this team getting blown out in the first round of the playoffs by whoever they play, which is most likely going to be Oregon.
This game actually kind of went like I expected. I was saying last week that Troy has a very underrated defense, and you saw that today. James Madison only scored 24 on offense because that last touchdown was a scooping score, but I had the score being 31-13 and 31-14. I figured that they would cover, and they found a way. But yeah, James Madison, they did not play great in this one, and playoffs probably going to be a rough first round exit blowout, unfortunately.
Yeah, after seeing what I saw from Alonzo Bennett in the first quarter of this football game, he started for like 1 for 7. He had negative yards passing. I was like, they're really gonna have to turn this around in the second half of this game, and he's gonna have to put on a legitimate performance for me to think they have a chance against anybody in the playoff field. But he didn't really do much after that. I think he had a rushing touchdown, probably ran for like 85 yards, but he did not really have a big performance. The quarterback position in postseason matters so much. I just don't think they have a real difference maker at that position right now. He can get it done against the competition level that they've been playing against this season. That's very true. He's been doing it all year. But when it comes to teams that are in the Power Four, I don't think that James Madison would have won too many games this year. They got beat by 14 against Louisville, which they had a chance to actually win that game. So they put up a decent performance. That was their only loss this year. They didn't play anybody else that was good.
That's also too though, and they were still messing with the two quarterback system for some reason, and that was really stupid. If they would have rode with Alonzo Bennett, I think they would have had a much better chance to win that one.
Yeah, I agree. I think we made that distinction early on. Alonzo Bennett is their better quarterback, but I just don't think that he presents the threats necessary to make them dangerous on offense. If they had a guy like Byron Brown or Drew Messamaker at quarterback, I'd be like, yeah, they probably could make a close game against somebody in a shootout if they get lucky. I don't think James Madison's finding a shootout in Eugene or in Oxford. So with that being said, they get it done. They start 12-1 in the Sun Belt. That's a really good season. They lose their head coach Bob Chesney to UCLA after this postseason. They're going to give everything they got in their playoff game. I just don't think it's going to really matter. So, unfortunately, I doubt we'll have games like this in the future for the playoffs. If James Madison, teams like James Madison keep making it into the playoffs, something's going to have to change because I think the line on that game will probably be 20 plus points.
Yeah, you can blame the ACC for this one.
Yeah, we'll get back to that a little bit when we start getting to the optical assault segment. I think that'll be a fun conversation to have. Finally, for conference championship week, we have the Mountain West Conference. Figured this one was going to be chalk. Out of all the games on the slate, I was actually the most confident in this one. Boise State has not lost to UNLV in like 30 years. UNLV just has been abysmal against Boise State. We saw that earlier this season. UNLV was actually playing pretty good football. They get completely trounced by Boise State, like 56 to 20 something. It was horrible. They gave up like 400 rushing yards. I didn't see it being that bad, but I felt like Boise State was going to handle this game. Maddox Madsen comes back, unbeknownst to both of us. Landon actually did pick UNLV in this matchup, but was not aware that Maddox Madsen would be playing this
Yeah, I
game.
looked up like for his injury status on the internet and couldn't find anything.
Yeah,
I
I
just
didn't see
assumed he
anything
wasn't
either.
playing. It was nowhere.
I figured that they would win without him because their backup had been playing some decent football as of late. So regardless, I was going to roll with Boise State, probably running all over UNLV. But we're going to give Landon a freebie on this one to make our final game of the season really interesting. We'll talk about that in just a second. But Boise State gets the big win here, 38 to 21, to win the Mountain West Conference as a four-loss champion, not sniffing the playoffs. I had UNLV as my conference champion for the Mountain West and my 12 seed bid for the college ball playoffs preseason. They technically had a chance, but it wasn't really great when it came down to it at the end of the season. They lost to New Mexico and they lost to Boise State twice. So I think if they didn't have Boise State being the thorn in their side, they might have had a chance to make it over James Madison this season. So next year could be a good year for UNLV
They
if
can
they bring
recruit
back
some.
Calandria.
They can recruit some defensive players, maybe.
Yeah, their defense was one of the worst in the country. I think that definitely attributed to this game. They end up giving the 299 and four touchdowns to Madsen. The 35-yard touchdown extending the lead to 21 points for Malik Sherrod from Maddox Madsen was probably the key play in this one. Boise State had a commanding lead most of the game. This was the highest it ended up getting. Boise State tried to close it down later and get within a score, but Boise State ended up breaking off an even heavier lead later on. UNLV was 4 for 14 on third down. Boise State to their N and 16 on third down. So a big difference there. Boise State got it done on third down. They won the turnover battle 1-0, and UNLV had 9 penalties for 70 yards. Boise State only had 3 for 20. So Boise State dominated most statistical categories in this game. They've been the better football team this season, despite the fact that they have more losses. UNLV probably had a little bit easier of a schedule. So that being the final there, Boise State, little bit of an underwhelming season after making the playoffs last year. I wasn't surprised that that happened though after the start to the season against USF.
They always find a way to win the Mountain West. It seems, no matter
Yeah,
what.
I think that this is their last season in the Mountain West, right? They're going to Pac-12,
Yeah.
so this will be the last time we see either of these teams in the Mountain West. I think UNLV's going too, right?
No, they're staying.
Ooh, okay, yeah. So that's huge for UNLV moving forward. If they keep the Group of Five bid, We could definitely see UNLV make the playoffs next year with a little bit easier of a Mountain West slate. Not having Boise State be the thorn in their side could be huge. All right, it's time for our only game prediction of the entire slate, Army Navy. This is always a fun one for me. I like watching this game. I don't have any real ties to either of these teams. I have some buddies that go to Army, so that may play a little bit of factor in my bias here. This game matters more for our podcast though, because we ended up getting down to a tie going into the final week, right? Or
Oh,
no,
you have one game on me.
I'm up one game on Landon after we predicted almost 200 games this season. Absolutely insane that it's come down to one game. Promise we didn't script this for clicks. So, Landon, I'm going with Army. I'm going to take them 24-21. I really wanted to take Navy and Blake Horvath in this one and Eli Heidenreich, but just feel like the team that usually has nothing to lose in this game and is probably having the worst season seems to win. Like Army is due for a signature win this season. They haven't had many great ones. They beat Kansas State. That was their best win of the season. I think that they could cap off their season here with a huge win against Navy, which I'm sure the game's gonna have harsh conditions like it typically does. It should be fun. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking for Army to take a really close win here, probably on a game-winning field goal or something like that.
This is almost always a weird game where records don't matter. And since I'm one game back from you and you're picking Army, I got to pick Navy to try to make that up. Navy has been the better team all season, though. So they will be favored. They should win this game.
Yeah, Navy's got some big wins under their belt, and they've got key players on offense. Eli Heidenreich, one of the better receivers in the American Athletic Conference. He's been really solid all year. Blake Horvath has been one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in college football. Navy's a solid football team, but when it comes down to it, you have two triple option football teams playing against each other. That sets up for a close game 10 out of 10 times because neither team can recruit significantly better triple option talent than the other. So, unless one team has a massively better defensive edge, it's usually close, especially if it ends up being a snow or rain game, which I'm sure it will be
And it
something of the
seems like
sort
something's always happening at this game weather-wise.
always. So, I think it'll be close regardless of what happens. I'm going with Army. Landon's going with Navy. If Landon pulls this one out, he's completed a crazy comeback to tie up our series heading into bowl season. We're going to decide how we'll end up breaking that if Navy ends up winning this football game. Should be fun to watch, though. Bowl season is kind of taking a little bit of a hit right now, which will be a new conversation for next week. Teams are opting out of bowl games. Whole teams.
Yeah, what is it? Iowa State and there's someone Kansas State.
Yeah, Kansas State probably didn't even need to be in a bowl game, so I don't really care that much about that. But Iowa State
And
dropping out kind of sucks.
we have ESPN on right now, and I saw the ticker like 5, 10 minutes ago, and it actually said both those teams are getting fined for skipping bowl games.
Yeah, I think that plays in a factor, but a lot of these teams, when they lose a head coach or they lose a lot of players, they don't really want to go and play a bowl game. Team's not motivated, but if I'm a college football player knowing that I'm most likely playing my last game of the entire season, maybe my whole career, I want to play. So if my program decides to opt out, that impacts me and that impacts a lot of other players on the team and coaches that are auditioning for new jobs. I think it sucks for the game. It sucks for the sport. It sucks for bowl games. It sucks for brands.
It sucks for the seniors most of all.
Absolutely. And I think that it needs to be more spotlight on that. Nobody's really talking about that. I think it's unfortunate, but that's just where we're at with college football. A lot of things really need to change. And we'll be talking about that over the offseason as we're slowly inching closer to it. There's a lot of things on the table here that I think need to be up for debate. All right, so it's time to get into the college football playoff final selection. We just watched this a moment ago and we saw the announcements. There were a lot of shockers here, mainly one that we actually saw coming. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But Indiana, obviously the number one seed. They beat Ohio State. They deserve it. Only undefeated team left in college football. They only bumped Ohio State down to 2. I thought that was a big takeaway. I had them actually being down at 3.
Same
I
here.
thought Georgia probably being a conference champion deserved the 2 seed, but according to the selection committee, that doesn't matter. So it just matters who the best 4 teams are. But down the stretch, they changed their logic. Per the college football playoff selection committee, that's what they do. So we have Georgia at 3, Texas Tech at 4. That's your top 4 with buys. I thought that that's what was probably going to happen. Not in that order, but I figured those were the top 4 teams.
Something interesting I just realized too. We'll get to Bama later, but they were number 9. They did not move, but neither Georgia nor Bama moved after that game.
Yeah, I thought that was strange because Bama ended up being the team that got smoked. Georgia was the team that got the big win to kind of avenge their loss earlier in the season. if you think about it, if you dominate a team that barely beat you early in the season and that was your only loss and you're already a top three team, shouldn't you be higher if a team above you loses? I don't know. I think you should get rewarded for that. You should get rewarded for big wins and probably not punished drastically for losses against really good teams. They just the way they punish teams and the way that they reward teams is really strange to me. So neither team moves. That's a big takeaway moving forward for next year. So we've got Oregon at number 5, no movement there. Ole Miss at 6, A&M at 7, Oklahoma 8, Alabama 9, no movement. Miami jumps to 10. We saw this as Miami was a 7% chance to make the playoffs, and we put some
Or
money
no,
down
it
on
was a
it.
7% chance for Notre Dame to miss.
Yeah, and that was basically dependent on Miami making the playoffs. So we took Notre Dame to miss the playoffs here. We had a pretty good cash out. We won't talk numbers here, but we won a lot of money. So it was nice, cool stuff. I don't think many people saw this coming though, per the 7% that we got it at.
It's funny actually. I saw a lot of people talking about it, but I guess like overall people didn't.
There was
Maybe
some major heat over this on all the sets across the country. Like I was watching tons of people talk about it, and everybody had different opinions. So that says a lot. But at the end of the day, our opinion was the one that mattered the most, and we won money on it. So I guess we just have a pretty good feel for the game or how
yeah.
stupid the college football playoff selection committee is. So we ended up cashing on that. That was a big one for us. Tulane and James Madison, 11 and 12. That's got to get fixed. Neither of those teams deserve to be at those spots.
Remember the ACC needs to just try not to suck.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in just a moment, like we were talking about. But we have a rematch in the playoffs that I've been dreading for probably being the case. And Ole Miss will host a game in Oxford. Despite what I thought in the preseason, Ole Miss has exceeded my expectations to go 11 and 1. Only to play a team they beat 45 to 10 in a game that we watched in Oxford. It was a decimation. Like Tulane never had a chance. The game was not close. Jake Retzlaff was like 1 for 7 for 4 yards in the first half. It was terrible. It was terrible. That was Trinidad's second game, and he torched them. Absolutely torched them. What do you think's going to happen when they come back in a night game and we beat them by 50? I mean, it could be close. It's a higher stage, sure. A lot more on the line. I just don't love this spot. I don't like this spot for either team. It's a lose-lose for Ole Miss. You're supposed to win by 40. So if you don't, or if you lose, you're embarrassed. You get embarrassed on your home field in the biggest season of your entire team's existence. If you're Tulane, your coach is leaving. You're not supposed to win. You already lost by 35. If you win, you play spoiler and you lose in the second round against Georgia. So this is just not great for the sport either. I don't love this. I don't love James Madison going to Eugene. It's going to be a slaughter. Both these games should be 20 plus point lines, in my opinion. So don't like it. I think that that's got to change because there are teams on the fringe right now. You got Vanderbilt, you got Texas, you got BYU. Heck, I'd put Utah in over both those teams, and Utah's really not that great. So I don't love this. Something needs to change. I'm looking forward to talking about this more in the offseason with a little more clarity and maybe some different ideas to pitch.
I think it's just becoming more and more apparent that the Big Ten and SEC are the clear cut two best conferences because those conferences would never get passed up by a James Madison or something when it comes down to the auto bid. That would just never happen.
Yeah, and you got to be feeling pretty salty right now if you're BYU. You're watching a team that is clearly less talented than you, that has your quarterback that you suspended and kicked off the team last year that was going to be your quarterback this year. Take them to the playoffs when your two losses were to a top four team twice. I mean, you never even got a chance to have them at home. You play them away, and you basically play them in another away game in Texas in the conference championship game. So you play the same team away, top 14 twice, and you lose the same way both times. You don't play any other teams and lose the whole season, and you miss the playoffs because they have to put Tulane and James Madison in. Don't love it. It's just not a good look for the sport. So there is a lot that needs to change. We're going to keep talking about this as we get into the offseason, but this is going to be one of my biggest talking points is those last two seeds in the playoff. And we wouldn't be having this problem right now if Notre Dame would join a conference and the ACC would not be trash. So, speaking of the ACC being trash, we're going to go ahead and get into our optical assault game of the week. And yes, it is a result of a game, but it's mainly a conference. The ACC was another optical assault on my eyes this season. You have the 8-5 Duke Blue Devils as your conference champion when you've got 10-2 Miami sitting as an at-large team in the playoff. Your conference champion is so bad, they didn't even get into the 12-team playoff when they should have an auto bid for being one of the better conference champions. But because you lose to UConn, you lose to Tulane, and you lose to Illinois in a blowout at home, you don't make it. It's terrible. It's terrible. And then Virginia playing a team they already beat in a blowout earlier in the season, championship game, just to lose. The ACC is a train wreck. Clemson's a train wreck. Louisville's been a train wreck towards the end of the season.
The blame really all falls on Clemson.
I mean, Clemson and Georgia Tech both probably should have been better this season, and Georgia Tech actually had a chance, and they sold so hard. So every time an ACC team, we talked about this already, had a chance to kind of elevate themselves or separate, they lost. Every single time. SMU lost, Georgia Tech lost, Clemson lost early in the season, so they never even had a chance. Louisville lost, Miami lost,
Pittsburgh
Duke
lost.
lost. I mean, it just kept happening, and we're just sitting here like, what in the world is going on? You end up with these stupid tiebreakers. Both teams got in with stupid tiebreakers. Virginia shouldn't have gotten in because they lost to NC State. That was not a conference game, even though they're in the same conference and they have been for years. Doesn't make any sense. Then you've got Duke, who already lost 2 conference games, so they were already in a position to be in a tiebreaker, and they lost 3 non-conference games, but they still get in. Miami's sitting there at 10-2. Georgia Tech's sitting there at 9-3. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. So I think the ACC's got a lot to figure out there too. It's a complete joke. This conference cannot handle their business. Miami finally gets in, despite the fact that they didn't even play in their conference championship. So I just don't like that. I think that is a complete optical assault and is set up for a really strange bottom half of the playoffs, all thanks to the ACC.
And speaking more of Virginia, really the only reason that they were in the ACC championship game is because they had the second easiest schedule in the conference, 79th strength of schedule in the nation.
Awful.
I mean, there's a bunch of G5 teams that have harder schedules than that.
If Notre Dame had just joined the ACC like they should have, they probably would have won the conference championship, and there would never have been a conversation. And if there were no dumb tiebreakers, Miami would have gone to the conference championship and won, and we never would have had the conversation.
They
If
should have
both had done
done.
those things, then we would have them playing in the conference championship for a rematch.
They could have
Rather
done
than
what the
the entire
Mountain
debate.
West did. The Mountain West did like a power ranking to determine their 2 teams for the conference championship. But if they had done that, it would have definitely been Miami in there.
Yeah, it was a complete joke. I just don't like it. I'm definitely going to need LASIK after watching the entire ACC slate from this year. It was awful. Hopefully, they get their crap together for next year. That's going to wrap up our podcast for today. We had a shorter one, just given the fact that we don't have a lot of games coming up next weekend. It's just the Army Navy game, and then maybe 1 or 2 bowl games that are slated to start the beginning of the next week. We're going to wait for the bowl game announcements this week. They should be coming up here in just a moment, but we'll come back next week with our predictions on a majority of them.